You're listening to The Briefing, first broadcast on the 24th of September 2024 on Monocle Radio. Hello and welcome to The Briefing, broadcasting live from Studio One here at Midori House in London. I'm Georgina Godwin. Coming up on today's programme, over 500 people have been killed in Lebanon this week. We'll have the latest from Beirut as Israel moves its focus from Gaza to Lebanon. Then,
I called for this summit because our world is heading off the rails and we need tough decisions to get back on track.
United Nations Secretary-General Antonio Guterres speaking at a summit on multilateralism in advance of the UN General Assembly, which begins in New York today. We'll have a roundup of business news and hear from Budapest, where the annual press distribution event is taking place. And finally, which news celebrity was Time magazine referring to in the headline, "She's an icon, she's a legend, and she is the moment"? We'll examine the startling rise of a gorgeous global superstar. All that right here on The Briefing with me, Georgina Godwin. More than 500 people have died and thousands have fled the south of Lebanon as Israel launched a fresh wave of airstrikes and tank fire targeting Hezbollah. The Iran-backed militant group retaliated with a series of rockets aimed at Israeli targets. Lina Khatib, who is director of the SOAS Middle East Institute and associate fellow for the Middle East and North Africa programme at Chatham House, joins me now. Lina, many thanks for coming on the show. Now, one Lebanese official says the amount of people killed was the highest number of violent deaths in one day since the 1975 to 1990 civil war. And I wondered if you could tell us more about this deadly wave of Israeli attacks.
This definitely has been the bloodiest attack in Lebanon, as you pointed out. Definitely the largest since the last war between Israel and Hezbollah in 2006. The number of casualties in one day is really beyond what anyone had expected, because Lebanon has seen this exchange of fire between Hezbollah and Israel for almost a year, since last October. But until this week, it had been relatively low level. And until this week, the number of civilian deaths had been relatively limited. But the vast majority of those killed this time have been civilian.
Was there some warning to the residents of Beirut?
There was a warning to the residents of the south. Most of the attacks are happening in southern Lebanon, not in Beirut. There was one attack in the southern suburb of Beirut, which targeted a Hezbollah commander, but of course also, unfortunately, killed civilians because it was in a civilian area. But most of the attacks are happening in the south. There have been warnings, but the warnings are not enough for thousands of people to just pick up their things and flee. There have been a number of road accidents as a result of the panic, and the situation is really dire.
So obviously people are reacting with panic. They're trying to get out. I understand traffic's gridlocked. Where are they heading and where are they taking shelter?
They are heading north because obviously southern Lebanon is the area bordering Israel. So they're trying to get as far as possible from southern Lebanon. They're basically heading towards Beirut or the Lebanese mountains further away from the south.
Now, Hezbollah has been fighting back, launching several rocket attacks into Israel. How much damage has been caused?
Well, the attacks by Hezbollah have been on an almost daily basis against Israel since last October. Basically, Hezbollah has been launching rockets, and this has caused, again, tens of thousands of people to flee northern Israel. So we're talking mass displacement on both sides.
Hezbollah is considered far more capable than Hamas. Does Israel have the capacity to fight them in an all-out war, should that happen?
I mean, the way I see it, if Israel has not been able to claim military victory over Hamas after almost a year of fighting, it's certainly not going to be able to claim military victory over Hezbollah in a matter of weeks, because Hezbollah is the most armed militia in the world. So it's a lot more sophisticated than Hamas in terms of its military capability. And it is not an easy group to subdue. And although Israel is now claiming that it has destroyed a large section of Hezbollah's arsenal, the group still is strong enough to put up a really serious battle.
Has there been any reaction or comment from Iran at retaliation? Is Iran likely to get involved with this directly?
Iran is Hezbollah's and Hamas's backer, but especially Hezbollah's main provider of weapons and training. And it is curious that as things escalate, Iran has been silent because Iran does not want to be involved itself in this war between Hezbollah and Israel. Iran doesn't want to be targeted itself, so it has kept quiet.
Lina, thank you very much indeed. That was Lina Khatib. Now here's Carlotta Rebello with the day's other news headlines.
Thanks, Georgina. 2 Russian bombers capable of nuclear strikes have carried out a mission in neutral waters near the western coast of Alaska, according to Russian media, who cited the defense ministry. The flight comes hours after Japan was forced to use flares to warn off Russian reconnaissance aircraft that had entered northern Japanese airspace. Plane maker Boeing says it has made a final offer to machinists who have been striking in the United States. The workers' union has responded that the proposal does not meet their expectations and there would be no ratification vote, likely prolonging the strike. And the United States plans to donate 1 million Mpox vaccine doses to African countries. US President Joe Biden was to announce the measure later today in New York, which will include $500 million in financial support for countries to back their responses to an outbreak of the virus. Those are the day's headlines. Back to you, Georgina.
Thanks, Carlotta. The United Nations General Assembly, the yearly gathering of world leaders, begins in New York today. Presidents, prime ministers and leaders of 193 countries have been invited to the highest UN gathering, and the escalating conflict in the Middle East will be high up on the agenda. Well, joining us now from New York is the reporter H.J. Mai. H.J., thanks for coming on the show once again. How has the Middle East conflict played into the gathering so far?
I mean, I think it's one of the overarching issues here in New York this week. You mentioned, there's other conflicts too, but really the escalation, especially now that we've seen over the past week between Israel and Hezbollah, is really top of mind here. When we will hear addresses today during the general debate, I think we will hear a lot about what's going on in the Middle East and, what the UN can really do to, really steer a course for peace, I would call it. I also recently talked to Michael Allen. He's a former National Security Council member. He was on with George W. Bush under his administration. And he really told me that he thinks the way it looks at the moment and the way that the UN is structured, that the international community can't do much. Maybe we can take a listen.
I don't think the international community wants to do what needs to be done, which is the implementation of the UN Security Council resolution from 2006, which is 1701. That's what you need to do. But I just don't know that the diplomatic cards are lined up in the right way to enable this to happen.
Yeah, what he mentioned there, this resolution that was passed way back in 2006, really called for disarmament of Hezbollah, called for withdrawal of Israeli troops from southern Lebanon. That took years until Israel actually withdrew all its troops. And he thinks that would really be the only solution to this conflict. And as I think your previous guest mentioned, and he also thinks, if this continues, there could be also the case that Iran might get involved and, that could really further escalate the situation. Maybe we can take another listen.
It could definitely escalate because Iran could choose to do more depending on how it's going with Hezbollah.
And H.A., what about Ukraine? I know that you attended an event with Jens Stoltenberg.
Yeah, exactly. I went to the Concordia Annual Summit. It's one of the big gatherings here every year on the sidelines of the UN. And Stoltenberg actually was awarded a leadership award, for his now 10 years that he's been the, NATO Secretary General. And yeah, he mentioned that over the 10 years that he's been in charge, the world has certainly become more dangerous. But he also thinks that NATO is stronger, and so he still is confident that there will be a resolution to the conflict in Ukraine. And obviously, Ukrainian President Zelensky is in town, and he's promoting his new peace plan. I think he promotes it as the Victory Plan. And apparently, there will be a meeting between Zelensky and Biden where he will lay out his peace plan. And we will see how this continues, but it's those two wars, and then also, to be honest, the conflict in Sudan that really are top of mind here at the General Assembly.
On Monday, there was the Summit for the Future. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, the Summit for the Future, and that started also on Sunday when actually the UN member nations passed and voted on the Pact for the Future. And what it really is really that, for years now, people have been talking about that the current setup of the United Nations is not really, I guess, conducive to, really produce any outcomes. And so there will be changes. And the question is now, member nations agreed, I think 140 of the 193 member nations agreed to this Pact for the Future. And the question is now, how to implement it. Can there be changes to, let's say, the National Security Council setup? There are a lot of countries who would like to see the number of permanent members increased on the Security Council, including the US. And also, the big crisis of 2024 and beyond, from climate change to humanitarian issues, famine, and water crisis and all those things. Those are all in this Pact for the Future. And that was discussed yesterday during the Summit for the Future. And we heard a lot of speeches and people basically talking about the grievances of the structure of the UN, and that things have to change to make this body that was now founded 79 years ago, that it really moves forward and moves with the times that we are in.
I see that Russia has been annoying people. Olaf Scholz said it was somewhat irritating that in the end Russia once again tried to stop the whole process. He's referring to this new amendment that Russia wants for non-interference in the internal affairs of state. That was dismissed overwhelmingly.
Yeah, it was. I think it only got the usual backers that always come to Russia's support. I think countries like Belarus, Iran, Syria. I think Venezuela was one of them. But yeah, it was overwhelmingly rejected. Russia in the last several years tried to increase its influence in Africa, and even African countries overwhelmingly rejected that amendment.
Now, it is Biden's speech coming up today. This will be his last to the UN. What do we expect from that? President Biden is really on his way out, as we all know, and he really wants to highlight what he has achieved over the past 4 years. The conflicts that we already discussed will be also top of mind during his speech. But then he also wants to talk about he came into the office trying to establish American leadership, and we will hear that according to him, the U.S. has done that over the past 4 years under his leadership, to establish itself as a global leader. He will also talk about synthetic drugs. Obviously, this is a huge problem here in this country, especially fentanyl and other opioids kill close to 100,000 each year in the United States. So he will talk about that, and there has been this global coalition, to counter the drug threat, and that's really what will be the focus. And also, I think there will be a lot of I guess pushback on some of the the storylines that we've been hearing in terms of the Middle East. I think he wants to make clear that the U.S. is still supporting Israel, but there will also be once again a line in there
saying that Israel just has to, take more responsibility for civilian casualties and try to limit it even more than it has tried to do. And so I think it will be an interesting speech. I think there will be probably a lot of applause and standing ovations, as everybody knows. His term is coming to an end, and he's obviously not running again. So, but those are the main focuses that he will try to get into his speech today.
HJMI, thank you very much indeed. You're listening to The Briefing on Monocle Radio. You're back with The Briefing, and it's time for the latest business news. And for that, I'm joined now by Bloomberg's Ewan Potts. Ewan, many thanks for coming on The Briefing. Another package of stimulus measures for the Chinese economy. This one's causing some waves.
Hi, Georgina. Yes, we've spoken before about Beijing's attempts to get the economy growing faster in China. Well, to use the economics term, they're not messing around with this one. This is a really big package of stimulus. It was unveiled at an unusual press conference, which lasted for more than an hour and a half. And they've really simultaneously done a load of stuff in an attempt to get the economy growing faster. You remember that the target is for the economy to grow by around 5%. Economists are split as to whether they'll make it or not, but the government in China is really keen to particularly get the property market moving. Prices are still going lower in the property market. There is no confidence amongst Chinese consumers in the property market. So whilst prices are falling, people don't want to buy houses. It's perhaps unsurprising. Lots of leftover inventory as well. So the package unveiled today is not only a cut to the short-term interest rate in China, much like the sort of cuts we're seeing elsewhere in the world, but also plans to reduce the amount of money banks must hold in reserve. They're cutting that to the lowest level since 2016. When you cut bank reserve levels, it means they can lend more. And also a big package of measures to support the property market as well. They're going to cut outstanding mortgage rates for individual borrowers by an average of 0.5 percentage points. And they're going to cut the minimum down payment levels on second home purchases from 25 to 15%. So a big measure to make it easier for people to buy second homes. The changes in the China's real estate crisis is now in its fourth year, and really no signs of it letting up. There's just no confidence in the market. Whether this will shift sentiment remains to be seen, but certainly in terms of the wider package, a lot of confidence injected into the stock market. China's stocks closed up 4% today. That was its biggest gain in more than 4 years. And a lot of China exposed companies here in Europe having a very good day as well. Shares in French luxury groups Kering and LVMH, both on the leaderboard, as are mining stocks as well. Of course, China, an enormous consumer of natural resources. So the mining companies hoping that the economy will grow faster in China. So this is really China firing on all cylinders when it comes to boosting their economy.
Let's turn our gaze to Europe now and the Italian plan to take over Germany's Commerce Bank. That's proving increasingly controversial.
Yeah, this is really a big corporate story of the last couple of weeks. It's taken everybody, not least officials in Berlin, by surprise. This is the move by UniCredit, the big Italian bank, to take over Commerce Bank, a smaller rival in Germany. We first heard about the stake which UniCredit built up just less than 2 weeks ago now. They built up a stake of 9% in the German bank. It's coming at the same time that the German government is offloading its holding in Commerce Bank. And UniCredit had been cheekily sucking up these shares as they came on the market. And this morning, UniCredit said that it's got now an equivalent stake of 21%. It's been using derivatives to increase its stake in Commerce Bank. That makes it the second biggest shareholder now after the German government. And it is causing something of a diplomatic spat. Officials in Giorgia Meloni's administration have privately criticised the fact that Berlin advocates for more European integration and then comes out against European integration when it involves one of their companies. And some in Rome are unhappy at the way that UniCredit has gone about this. It's really taken quite an aggressive move towards the German lender. The German Chancellor himself, Olaf Scholz, says that unfriendly attacks, hostile takeovers are not a good thing for banks, which is why the German government has taken a clear position. He says, "We do not consider this to be an appropriate course of action." Italy's foreign minister, though, says that in Europe there is a free market, and I don't understand why somebody comes to buy in Italy, they say we're in a European system, and then if an Italian buys, it's no longer a single market. So something of a war of words over the future of Germany's Commerce Bank.
Ewan Potts, thank you very much indeed. You're listening to The Briefing on Monocle Radio. Distripress, the annual press distribution event, takes place in Budapest this year. And Monocle's senior correspondent, Fernando Augusto Pacheco, is attending for us. He joins us now. Fernando, what about the floods, first of all? Are you wet?
Not really, Georgina. You know what? That everyone was saying, you're going to Budapest, be careful with the floods. But the reality is the weather is being wonderful here, very sunny. I think today is going to reach 24 degrees, but there's been an issue with the flooding. So the Danube is a little bit flooded, but I think at least Budapest, the city was kind of well prepared. I'm not sure about other parts of Hungary. Apparently there's been more issues there, but I think Budapest, you know, it's not something that is new for them. But the city itself in the last days and during Distripress, there were a lot of concerns, but thankfully the sun is here for sure.
Well, let's talk about Distripress, which is the event that you're there for. What were the main issues discussed at this year's event?
Well, first of all, I think Distripress is such an interesting event. It's the 69th edition. It happens every year in a different city. Because, Georgina, the work those people do, they are the ones responsible for making sure our favorite magazines and newspapers are on the shelves. You know, so there are people dealing with publishing, production, marketing, sales. So on the first day, the official first day on Monday, there were a lot of talks, including, I did one talk, we're going to talk about this later, but then is a time to do business meetings. And I think then our very own Holly Anderson, I mean, she's a very busy girl, I have to say, during Distripress. It's a very interesting event. We talk about the challenges because distribution is expensive. But at the same time, I think our industry sometimes they become a little bit too pessimistic. There are glimmers of hope. It's not all, you know, we're tired of this, like, oh, print is dead or the magazine sales are dropping. There are a lot of positive stories around the world. We have to say that.
And of course, Holly Anderson is the person who deals with distribution for Monocle, and that is a very positive story. It's increasing all the time. You mentioned that you headlined one of the panels. What were you talking about?
Yeah, it was a delight. It was my second time, you know, talking one of the panels. Basically, in my panel, I selected 20 magazines, newspapers, or anything related to print that I think has a nice story to tell. Don't worry, I was quick. It was 20 slides, but I think I kept it to time. You know, and for example, from a magazine from Estonia that is funded by the government. So that's a way of soft power, to a beautiful French publication about cinema. And also on stage, I had the pleasure to speak also with Gauthier Robial. He is, you know, the managing director of News and Coffee, which are doing an excellent work. They have a series of kiosks in Spain, you know, from Madrid to Barcelona, and they are expanding. They have one in London. I think they're looking for other markets, and it's lovely. You have your favorite coffee, and they have a nice selection of independent magazines. So we had a lovely chat. I introduced my 20 slides, and people, to be honest, they said to me, "Thank you, Fernando, for telling us positive stories," because even in an event like Distripress, as I said, some people had this tendencies to be a little bit negative. Sure, we have to talk about the challenges, but there are many, many good opportunities out there.
Now, from coffee to cocktails, you actually hosted a Monocle Distripress cocktail party.
Yes, it was a Sodi, a lovely kind of rooftop bar here in the city of Budapest. It was lovely. You know, it was a mix of some of the guests from Distripress, but I think we also invited some of our subscribers. There were some interesting people from the lovely Hungarian brand Nanushka, which I adore it. I recommend to everyone. And of course, we give our awards, you know, for the best distributors of people who did an excellent job with Monocle. So, you know, we're talking about positive stories here. The French market, our French distributors, I mean, the circulation rose, I believe, 11%, Confact up 26%. So I think we want to celebrate those people as well. And you know, kiosks where we do lovely partnerships, like with Gauthier Robial that I was mentioning from News and Coffee.
And now, of course, people will know that you are the presenter of The Stack, which is our programme about all things print-related. Can we expect some content from Hungary in the upcoming episodes?
Absolutely, especially from Central Media. In fact, while I'm talking to you, I have a selection of Hungarian magazines close to me. I mean, I gotta say, my Hungarian is not the best. It's a difficult language to learn, but I have a women's title here called Monocle. I will actually talk to the CEO to find out more, but it's a weekly women's magazine, and it has amazing sales. And by the way, I have a little curiosity for you. I was at one of the panels. It was the woman who was responsible for the magazine distribution at Spar, the convenience store, which is quite big here in Hungary. She said that the most common item bought together with a magazine or newspaper was an Activia yogurt. I was very surprised. I'm not a fan myself, but very interesting.
Fernando, many thanks for that completely random fact. Fernando Augusto Pacheco, our senior correspondent and host of The Stack on Monocle Radio. Thank you. This is The Briefing. Right, just who was Time magazine referring to when they said she's an icon, she's a legend, and she is the moment? Well, there is a new viral sensation taking the internet by storm. Perhaps the world's first hippo influencer. It's the baby pygmy hippo Moo Deng, or Bouncy Pork, who was born in a zoo in Thailand 2 months ago. And joining us now from Bangkok is Monocle's Asia editor, James Chambers. James, I have to tell you, we speak of little else here at Midori House today. It's all about Moo Deng.
Hi, Georgina. Yes, it's amazing. I mean, I read about her every day here in Thailand, but you're not really aware of how big she's become globally until we talk about her like this.
Well, many people will have seen pictures and videos of this really delightful creature. For those who haven't, can you describe her?
Yeah, as you said, she's born 2 months ago. She's what they call a pygmy hippo. For those non-hippo experts out there, there are two types of hippo. There's the common hippo, I guess the image that we all think of, then a smaller version, the pygmy hippo, which are kind of common to West Africa. So Moo Deng is one of those. So she's still a baby and also won't grow to the size of a traditional hippo. At the moment, I guess she's in her very, 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 very cute stage. One of the things about these pygmy hippos is their eyes are more closer to the front. So I guess they look a bit more human than the original hippos. And she bounces around a lot. And apparently that bouncy period will only last for the first 6 months, a bit like a baby. So I guess she is peak cute right now, and people here are rushing to see her.
Well, tell us just about that rush, because we understand that the zoo's reporting sort of double attendance figures. But, I mean, she's incredibly popular. Why do you think that is? Are people just desperate for a bit of good news?
Well, yes. I mean, even someone like me who's not an animal lover, has been warmed. My cold heart has been won over. I mean, I smile and when I see her pictures. And I think you're right. I mean, it's pretty grim around the world, including in Thailand, where the economy is not doing very well. So just seeing her videos and pictures of her every day, is a nice lift. That there are publications and media companies and experts who are digging deeper into the science behind all this and how she's triggering our innate kind of caring, and because she looks a bit more like a baby than perhaps some other infant animals. But as you said, she ticks all the boxes when it comes to becoming a viral sensation, and she's been provoking all kinds of internet memes. So, it is nice to have something to smile about. But, if you look at it from a more cynical perspective, the zoo and her keeper have from day one, tried to make her famous. They realized when she was born what asset they had, and they've been very honest in the fact that when they made these videos, they tried to make her a sensation in Thailand. The thing that came as a surprise to them is just how big she's become around the world.
Why are pygmy hippos so rare?
Well, they're endangered species. I think there's only about 2,500 in the wild, so they are protected. and I guess they, but by the same token, they do breed a bit more than pandas. The Moo Deng's parents have had at least 7 kids in this zoo. So Moo Deng is the 7th. Their names, if you're interested, are Tony, who's 24, and Jonah, who's 25 years old. So it sounds like they'll live at least about 50 years. So they might have a few more children in them yet. But yes, in the wild, there's not a lot of them. But it seems like they are doing very well in zoos, and it's not just this particular zoo in the Chonburi province, which is not that far from Bangkok. It's on the way to Pattaya, but actually all zoos in Thailand seem to be having a bit of a Moo Deng bounce, as people who live in different parts of the country flock to see other pygmy hippos, and actually the extended family of Moo Deng is proving to be quite a draw, and there is an aunt in another part of the country who's also pulling in the crowds.
And finally, James, I wonder if Moo Deng's celebrity is being used to reinforce a conservation message.
Well, I mean, I would hope so. I don't know where you stand, Georgina, on visiting animals in captivity. But the dark side of all this is that people want to go and see her, and they want to see her perform. They want to see her bounce around and be cute. So when they turn up, and it's not the 1 hour or 2 hours a day when she's doing just that, people have already started throwing things at her to try and wake her up and trying to get her to do the things that have been the subject of all these videos. So it's not all warmth and smiley funny videos. There is a negative part of it. So I guess it all goes down to where we all stand on animals in captivity. I guess this is an endangered species. It does seem to be doing well in zoos, but this zoo has also come in for criticism in the past for how it treats its elephants and the performances that they are meant to do. So for my own sake, I'm not rushing to go and see them because I don't quite know where I stand on it. I've seen how elephants are treated here, and I'm not sure I agree with all that, but I guess it's for everyone to make their own minds up, and for now we can watch the live stream, which I understand is imminent.
Oh, I'm tuning into that right away. James, thank you very much indeed. That was James Chambers in Bangkok, and that's all for this edition of The Briefing. It was produced by Chris Chermak, and our researchers were Gunnar Grinlid and Sana Jamani. Our studio manager was Steph Chungu. The Briefing is back tomorrow at the same time. I'm Georgina Godwin. Goodbye, and thanks for listening.